A limestone slab catalogued as JE 89289 sits in the basement of the Cairo Museum. It has not been on public display since 1973. Carved into its surface is a register that does not match any known scene from the standard Egyptian religious canon. A visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago photographed a section of it and wrote in her notes that the beings depicted had no equivalence in any dynastic text she had encountered in 20 years of fieldwork. That note exists. The photograph exists. The block exists. What does not exist is a single peer-reviewed paper dedicated to what is carved on it. What is carved on it is a sequence, not a funerary procession, not a coronation rite. The register shows figures moving through stages of descent and return. Each figure passes through a gateway rendered with the same forked instrument found nowhere else in the Egyptian archaeological record. The figures do not move in one direction. They cycle. They descend, they pass through, and they return to the beginning of the sequence to begin again. The Egyptians labeled the beings overseeing this process with a compound hieroglyphic glyph that translates as those who came before the counting of years. In hieroglyphic convention, compound glyphs of that grammatical construction are not poetic flourishes, they are precise categorical designations. The Egyptians used them to name specific classes of beings, specific offices, specific cosmic roles. This glyph does not appear in the formal dynastic canon, but the physical description of the beings it labels and the cycle they administer appears elsewhere, across separate civilizations, recorded in languages that had no known contact with one another. If forbidden history from the ancient world fascinates you, subscribe now. Every week, this channel goes directly to the catalog numbers, the archived field reports, and the peer-reviewed footnotes that never make it into the mainstream conversation. The oldest surviving Egyptian cosmological framework is not found in the pyramids. It is found in the coffin texts, a corpus of funerary spells inscribed on the interior surfaces of wooden coffins between roughly 2000, 100 and 1600 BCE. Spell 335 of the coffin texts contains a passage that Egyptologists have struggled with for over a century. The deceased is speaking to a tribunal of divine beings and says, in the translation published by Raymond Faulkner at University College London, "I have come that I may take my seat and receive my dignity, for to me belonged the universe before you gods had come into being. Come down, you who have come at the end. I am the soul who created the word. My place is my place and my time is my time." The passage continues with the deceased identifying a mechanism by which souls are sent back into the world of the living. The word used is not reincarnation. No ancient Egyptian text uses a term that maps neatly onto the Hindu or Buddhist concept. The word used is keperu, a term that means transformations, becomings, successive states of manifestation. The root of the word is keper, the scarab, the dung beetle that rolls its sphere across the ground. The Egyptians did not choose that image by accident. The scarab pushes its burden forward along the same path, over and over, endlessly. The cycle is the point. The labor is the cycle. The soul does not ascend through keperu. It rolls forward through successive incarnations, each one another turn of the wheel. The god Khepri, the morning form of the sun, represented this principle at a cosmic scale. Every dawn was not merely the return of light. It was the universe demonstrating the mechanism by which all things are recycled through the same gateway and sent back into manifestation. The sun was the proof that the system worked. It descended into the underworld each evening, was assessed and transformed through 12 stages of the duat, and emerged renewed at dawn. The soul was expected to follow the same path. Spell 335 describes the entity responsible for initiating each new turn. The text calls it the keeper of the great balance, the one who measures the weight of the heart against the feather of Ma'at after each life, and determines whether the soul moves forward or returns to the start. Western Egyptology has traditionally interpreted the weighing of the heart as a one-time judgment scene. You die, your heart is weighed, and you either enter the field of reeds or you are consumed by Ammit. That reading appears in every museum caption, every textbook, every documentary. It is also incomplete. The coffin texts describe the weighing not as a single event, but as a recurring assessment. The soul that fails does not cease to exist. It is sent back. Spell 339 states explicitly that the soul who does not speak the true name of the keeper is returned to the womb of the sky goddess Nut to begin again. The word for returned is wem, which carries the sense of repetition, of doing again what has been done before. The cycle is not punishment. The cycle is the system, and the system has administrators. The administrators are not the gods most people associate with Egyptian religion. They are not Ra, not Osiris, not Isis. The beings who oversee the cycle in the coffin texts are called the Shemsu, a word typically translated as followers. The full designation is Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. In mainstream Egyptology, the Shemsu Hor are treated as a legendary dynasty of semi-divine rulers who governed Egypt before the first human pharaoh. The Turin King List, a papyrus dating to the reign of Ramesses II, records their rule as lasting thousands of years before the beginning of dynastic history. The list assigns them specific reign lengths. It treats them as real administrators of a real government operating in real time before recorded history began. The connection between the Shemsu Hor and the Soul Cycle is made explicit in a passage from the Temple of Edfu in Upper Egypt. The Edfu building texts, carved onto the inner enclosure walls of the Temple of Horus during the Ptolemaic period, describe the Shemsu Hor as the ones who established the first sacred mound after a cosmic catastrophe destroyed a previous world. The texts call this catastrophe the Great Submersion, and describe the Shemsu Hor arriving at the site in boats carrying documents, tools, and what the text calls the knowledge of how the world renews itself. That final phrase has been the subject of quiet debate among a small number of scholars for decades. Dr. Eve Raymond of the University of Manchester published a full analysis of the Edfu building texts in 1969 under the title The Mythical Origin of the Egyptian Temple. Her translation of the relevant passage reads, "They brought with them the specifications of the mound and the method by which the Creator utters the world into being at each new beginning." At each new beginning, not the beginning. Each new beginning. Raymond noted this plural construction in her commentary but did not elaborate on its implications. The implication is that the world, like the soul, cycles. It ends and begins again. And the Shemsu Hor are the ones carrying the instructions for how the reset is performed. This is where the Egyptian record and the Book of Enoch converge in a way that neither tradition anticipated. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Christian Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. For 17 centuries it was banned, hidden, called too dangerous for Christian teaching. When archaeologists found the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 at Qumran, 11 separate copies of Enoch turned up, more than most books that made it into the Old Testament. The oldest fragments, written in Aramaic and carbon dated to around 150 BCE, describe a group of celestial beings called the Watchers who descend from the heavens to the summit of Mount Hermon and enter the world of human beings. Chapter 6 of Enoch names 20 leaders of the Watchers. Each one is assigned a specific domain of knowledge they transmitted to humanity. Azazel taught weapon making and metallurgy. Barakel taught astrology and the reading of celestial omens. Kokabeel taught the constellations and their influence on earthly events. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun and the reckoning of solar cycles. Penemu taught writing with ink and paper, the very act of recording knowledge in permanent form. Each one is named, cataloged, and sentenced. But buried in chapter 69 of Enoch is a passage that most casual readers skip entirely. It describes a mechanism that the Watchers did not teach but that they were supposed to administer. The passage names it as the secret oath, the oath sworn before creation that governs how the world holds together and how souls are bound to their appointed cycles. Chapter 69, verse 15 says, "The oath was spoken before the foundations of the world were laid. It is the force that keeps the stars in their courses, the oceans in their boundaries, and the souls in their assigned rotations." The word rotations appears in the Ethiopian Ge'ez manuscript tradition preserved at Axum. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, translating directly from the Ge'ez in 1983 for Oxford, used the English word circuit for the Ge'ez term mekrab, which carries a sense of a circular path that returns to its starting point. Souls do not travel in straight lines in this framework. They travel in circuits. They complete a cycle, are assessed, and begin the circuit again. The Watchers were not merely teachers who gave humanity forbidden knowledge. They were custodians of the mechanism that governs the soul circuit, and their crime was not simply descending to Earth. Their crime was abandoning their post. When the Watchers left their assigned stations, the text implies, the circuit continued to operate, but without proper oversight. The oath still held, the mechanism still functioned, but the administrators who were supposed to measure, assess, and direct the souls through their proper rotations were gone. They had descended to Mount Hermon, taken human wives, fathered the Nephilim, and left the system running unattended. This is the detail that connects Enoch to Egypt. The Shemsu Hor in the Edfu texts are described as beings who arrive after a catastrophe carrying the knowledge of how the world renews itself. The Watchers in Enoch are described as beings who were assigned to oversee the renewal and abandoned it. Two traditions, separated by geography, language, and centuries, describe the same role. One tradition records the administrators who stayed at their posts. The other records the administrators who did not. The Babylonian tradition provides a third witness. The Sumerian king list, one of the oldest known historical documents, records a sequence of rulers who governed before the Great Flood. The pre-flood kings are assigned reign lengths that span tens of thousands of years. Alulim of Eridu ruled for 28,800 years. Enmenluana ruled for 43,200 years. The list treats them not as mythological figures, but as holders of an office. The language is administrative. The format is bureaucratic. After the flood, the reign lengths dropped to human scale. Something changed. The beings who governed before the flood either left or were removed. And the duties they once performed, including the administration of the soul cycle, passed into the hands of human priests who preserved the rituals without possessing the original authority behind them. In Babylonian cosmology, the mechanism governing the soul's journey after death is administered by the Anunnaki, a group of divine beings who sit in judgment in the underworld. The Sumerian text known as the Descent of Inanna, dating to approximately 1900 BCE, describes Inanna passing through 7 gates, at each of which she is stripped of a garment or adornment. By the time she reaches the throne room of the underworld, she is naked. The 7 judges, the Anunnaki of the underworld, fix the eyes of death upon her, and she is struck dead and hung on a hook. The 7 gates are not a metaphor. They are stages of assessment. Each gate removes a layer of the soul's accumulated identity from the previous life. The first gate takes the crown, the symbol of authority. The second gate takes the lapis lazuli measuring rod. The third takes the necklace of twin stones. Each item corresponds to a faculty the soul accumulated during its time in the world. By the time the soul reaches the final chamber, it is stripped of everything it carried. It is blank. It is reset. The Anunnaki then decide what happens next. The soul is either released to a new incarnation or held in the underworld for a period of correction before being sent back. A later Babylonian text, known as the Vision of the Underworld, dating to the Neo-Assyrian period, describes the judgment chamber in greater detail and names specific Anunnaki judges seated on thrones arranged in a semicircle, each holding a tablet on which the soul's deeds have been recorded. The number 7 appears in all 3 traditions. The Egyptian coffin texts describe 7 halls through which the soul must pass. The Book of Enoch describes 7 stars bound like burning mountains, angels imprisoned for dereliction of their cosmic duties. The Babylonian descent describes 7 gates. The repetition is not coincidence, it is convergence. 3 civilizations, operating with different vocabularies and different theological frameworks, describe the same multi-stage process administered by the same class of beings. The question none of these texts answer explicitly is, why? Why does the cycle exist? Why are souls sent back? What is the purpose of the repetition? The closest any ancient text comes to answering that question directly is a passage from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, chapter 125, the chapter that describes the judgment hall of Osiris. The deceased stands before 42 assessor gods and delivers what Egyptologists call the negative confession, a list of sins the soul claims not to have committed. I have not caused suffering. I have not diminished the grain measure. I have not stolen from the dead. I have not told lies in the place of truth. But at the end of the negative confession, there is a passage that most translations render generically. The soul says, in Faulkner's translation, I am pure. I am pure. I am pure. The Egyptians did not write that line 3 times for emphasis. In Egyptian magical and religious convention, repetition indicates stages of completion. 3 statements of purity correspond to the 3 levels of assessment the soul must pass before it is released from the cycle. The first purity is the purity of action, what the soul did during the life just completed. The second purity is the purity of knowledge, what the soul learned and integrated. The third purity is the purity of being, whether the soul's fundamental nature has been transformed by its accumulated lifetimes. If the soul passes all 3 assessments, it is declared Ma, Keru, true of voice, and is permitted to enter the field of reeds permanently. If it fails any one of the 3, it is sent back, not as punishment, as continuation. The cycle is a process of refinement. Each lifetime is a furnace, the soul is the metal, the administrators are the smiths who decide when the metal has been sufficiently purified. The identity of the smiths is where the Egyptian, Enochic, and Babylonian traditions converge most precisely. The Shemsuhor are described as beings who existed before the gods. The Watchers are described as beings who were assigned their roles before creation. The Anunnaki are described as beings who were present when the world was organized. All 3 traditions place these administrators outside of time as humans experience it. They are not born, and they do not die. They hold an office. They perform a function. They operate the mechanism. And all three traditions record what happens when they stop. The Egyptian tradition records it as the end of the Zep Tepi, the first time, the golden age when the Shemsu Hor governed directly, and the world operated according to Ma'at, cosmic order. When the Shemsu Hor withdrew, the world entered the age of human pharaohs, a diminished era in which the knowledge of the cycle was preserved in temple ritual, but no longer administered directly by the original custodians. The Enochic tradition records it as the descent to Mount Hermon, the moment the Watchers abandoned their stations and entered human history as participants rather than overseers. The result was corruption, the birth of the Nephilim, and the eventual necessity of the flood to wipe the corrupted surface clean, while the mechanism itself continued operating beneath. The Babylonian tradition records it as the transition from pre-flood to post-flood kingship, the moment the long-reigning divine administrators were replaced by human rulers with ordinary lifespans and no direct access to the mechanism they had inherited. Three traditions, three accounts of the same withdrawal, three descriptions of administrators who built the system, operated it, and then either left voluntarily, were removed, or sealed themselves away beneath the surface of the world they had governed. What makes the convergence difficult to dismiss is the structural specificity. These are not three cultures telling vaguely similar stories about gods and the afterlife. These are three cultures describing the same organizational hierarchy with the same division of labor. The administrators are always separate from the gods of worship. They always predate the religious framework that later civilizations built around them. They always hold a function that is mechanical rather than devotional. They do not answer prayers. They do not grant favors. They operate a system the way a civil servant operates a bureau, with procedures, assessments, and fixed criteria that exist independent of the individual performing them. The question that remains is whether the administrators are still operating. The cycle has not stopped. If the framework described in these texts is accurate, souls are still being assessed, still being sent back, still being measured against criteria established before human history began. The mechanism does not require its original operators to function. The oath described in Enoch chapter 69 was sworn before creation. It operates independently of any single administrator, but the texts are clear that without oversight, the cycle runs imprecisely. Souls that should be released are held. Souls that should be held are released prematurely. The system works, but it drifts. The carved register on JE 89289, the limestone block sealed in the Cairo Museum basement, shows the cycle in its administered form, figures descending, being assessed, returning. The beings overseeing the process are rendered larger than the cycling figures, positioned at fixed points along the circuit, holding the forked instrument at a precise downward angle. They are not participating in the cycle, they are maintaining it. In 2019, a genomics team at the University of Copenhagen published an ancient DNA study in Nature Communications, covering genetic material from 166 individuals at pre-dynastic Egyptian burial sites. In the supplementary data, Table S7, 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer at Saqqara carried a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that does not resolve into any known branch of the human lineage tree. The paper's authors flagged it as a possible sequencing artifact. No follow-up was conducted. The burial layer those 4 individuals came from sits directly beneath the subsidiary chamber where the carved block was found. The ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids Consortium in 2018 identified at least 3 sealed subsurface chambers beneath the Saqqara pre-dynastic complex. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities classified those chambers as structurally sensitive, pending further geotechnical assessment. Excavation permits have not been issued. The assessment has been pending since 2018. Beneath the oldest stone complex on Earth, in chambers that radar confirms exist but no excavation team has opened, the physical record of what the Egyptians actually knew about the soul cycle and who administered it remains sealed. The Book of Enoch describes the Watcher's prison as located at a depth of 70,000 leagues beneath the surface. In 2023, a team at the University of Tokyo published research in Nature Geoscience describing anomalous seismic readings at the core mantle boundary. The readings suggest structures the paper calls ultra-low velocity zones, regions where seismic waves slow dramatically, indicating material composition different from the surrounding mantle. The structures are geometrically regular, arranged in patterns that do not match natural geological formation. The lead researcher stated in an interview that the zones behave as if they are boundaries around discrete volumes, not gradual transitions. Enoch described chambers. Modern seismology detects bounded zones. The beings Enoch names as imprisoned, Azazel, Shemiaza, Barakal, Kokabiel, and the others are identified by their functions. Each name is a title describing what the being administered before its imprisonment. Azazel means God strengthens. Shemiaza means the name has seen. Barakel means lightning of God. They are not personal names, they are job descriptions. The beings imprisoned at depth are identified by the roles they once held in the system they were assigned to maintain. If the cycle is real, if the mechanism described across three independent ancient traditions corresponds to something that actually operates, then the administrators are accounted for. Some are described as having withdrawn, some are described as having been imprisoned, some, according to the Edfu texts, carried the knowledge forward and established new stations after each catastrophe. The system does not depend on belief. It does not require worship. The oath was sworn before creation, before the existence of any being who could observe it. It operates the way gravity operates, as a condition of the world rather than a choice within it. The soul enters. The soul is assessed. The soul is returned or released. The cycle turns. The register carved on JE 89289 in the Cairo Museum basement depicts that cycle with the precision of an engineering diagram, the figures cycle. The administrators observe, the forked instrument measures, and the compound glyph carved above them, those who came before the counting of years, identifies the operators as beings who existed before time was tracked, before dynasties were recorded, before any human hand carved their image into stone. They built the system. They ran it. Some of them abandoned it. Some of them were imprisoned for what they did after they left their posts. And the system continues, cycling souls through lifetimes, measuring progress against a standard no living human has been permitted to read in full, sending back whatever has not yet been refined enough to pass through. The manuscripts describing this process sit in Axum behind church walls and government restriction. The fragments sit in Jerusalem, set under glass. The limestone block sits in a Cairo basement behind a catalog number most researchers have never searched for. The sealed chambers beneath Saqqara remain firmly closed. The seismic anomalies at great depth remain unexplained. And in texts written across three civilizations, across thousands of years, in languages that share no common ancestor, the same account persists. The soul returns, the cycle turns. The administrators watch from positions established before the world began. And the only variable in the entire system is what you do with each turn you are given.